Hi, Simone. Welcome. Well, I guess this is the Philos Project channel. I do the Overlook, and you're the host of Beyond Rome. So my fellow co-host here on the channel. But we're going to talk today about some theology surrounding like the woke right. But before we get into that, I don't know if you have any projects that you're working on or any words you want to open up with.
Oh, Dominique, it's so lovely to be back with you. Now it's called the Overlook. So I'm so happy. Always love to talk to you and can't wait to talk about what we're going to talk about today. Got a million projects on the way, but we'll save that for another conversation.
No, that's perfect.
Thank you.
Something we've talked a lot about with like the Christ is King conversation and Catholicism, you represent like the Catholic voice, me being a Protestant, have been key figures like Candace Owens. And when we talk about the woke right and the different motivations for people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens spewing these insane conspiracy theories, I think Tucker Carlson might be more politically motivated, but I've always felt that Candace Owens, and this is just my own analysis, is motivated by theology. And I know that she runs in Dr. Taylor Marshall's circle. Her husband, George Farmer, was interviewed at length on his channel. It appeared that they had at least some sort of a friendship or an understanding of each other. So I think if you can track some of these theological currents, we can kind of understand why some people in the woke right camp believe what they believe or are pushing the agenda that they're pushing. And I do think there is a theological kind of bedrock for this, for some of these political commentators or religious commentators. And I saw this on Patrick Bet-David's podcast. Patrick Bet-David kind of toes the line between both sides, and he's been very overtly anti-Iranian regime, being an Iranian refugee himself, but kind of questioning both sides, which is a little frustrating to me because I feel like it's platforming some pretty illegitimate and just fallacious claims, but that's what we're here to talk about today. So he interviewed Dr. Taylor Marshall, and in this clip, essentially he makes the statement that we as Christians don't have any loyalty to Israel. So we're going to talk kind of about supersessionism versus dispensationalism. So I'm just going to hit play, and then we'll stop along the way and kind of evaluate and analyze what he's saying.
The last 3 years, what happened with the rise of Israel, Hamas, the controversy back and forth. Now there's concepts they're using as the woke right, Israel, APAC, all of that. Charlie Kirk comments about loyalty Christians have to the church, Israel. No, that's not true. That's nowhere it says that. And it's where are you at? Because you come from a background of, PhD in philosophy, okay, then Episcopal priest, then Catholic. Last, you said 20 years. It's been almost 2005, I think, right?
2006 is
2006, 19 years. Yeah. So, what is your position with this sensitive topic that some say divided a bit of the Republican Party and got a lot of Democrats to leave the Democratic Party, become independents and Republicans?
Yeah. It's a complicated topic, and I weighed into it pretty heavily. I follow the historic traditional Catholic teaching, which is Christ came preaching the kingdom of heaven. He came first to his own, the Jewish people, and many of them followed him. Peter, John, Paul, Stephen, these are all early, the Blessed Virgin Mary, St. Joseph. But for the most part, he was rejected. And St. Paul in Romans chapter 9, he says to the Gentiles, the non-Jewish Christians, he says, look, don't brag that you're part of God's people now, God's kingdom, and don't be dismissive towards the Jewish people because they're part of the original vine, and because they were broken off and you were grafted in a way unnaturally, you're there. You can't just mock and belittle the branches that were broken off, be humble, have faith. I think that's the right attitude. I don't think Christians should belittle or mock Jewish people that don't believe in Jesus Christ. But I think it is very clear that Christ came preaching the kingdom of heaven, kingdom of God, calling people into the kingdom. And there's one kingdom of God. There's not two or three. There's one. And that I believe that Christians are the chosen people.
Okay, so I feel like that's loaded, but it's a good place to stop for a second. And the one thing that really stuck out with me, because I think it's intentional, is he said he follows historical Catholic teaching. Obviously, that means not Vatican II or Nostra Aetate. So from a Catholic perspective, can you provide us some insight on what he's saying?
I don't follow Dr. Taylor Marshall. Even before Philos, he was not somebody that was an attractive formator to me personally. When he says, it seems very redundant. I'm following historical, traditional Catholic. I think what he's saying here, and if you watch the whole 7-minute clip, I think he's basically saying, by I'm a traditional Catholic that I'm a supersessionist or I fall into replacement theology. So does he reject the Second Vatican Council? I don't know if he officially does, but he certainly is rejecting what the church teaches when it comes to the Jewish people, if he is a replacement theology supersessionist guy. And that seems to be what's implied here. So, I like that he quotes Romans 9 and says we shouldn't be dismissive, we shouldn't be arrogant. He recognizes that the early church is Jewish, but if he is into supersessionism or replacement theology, while it is true that traditionally the church has been dominated by supersessionist thought, it is actual tradition to follow the church's teachings, which are now, I would say, a development of thought when it comes to the Jewish people, which is that we do not, and we never have traditionally, officially, dogmatically taught supersessionism or replacement theology. There have been lots of theological thinking and thoughts on things that the dominant church agreed with, that the church never officially taught and even thought was heretical. St. Jerome in the early church said something like the world groaned and the church woke up Arian. Most bishops and priests at the time were falling into the Arian heresy, but the church never taught Arianism. And on the contrary, the Council of Nicaea taught against Arianism. I think we can think about church history when we think about it is true that supersessionist thought has dominated the majority of theological thinking when it comes to the Jewish people. But if you're really a traditional Catholic, you follow how the church develops her thought. And she has greatly developed her thought in the Second Vatican Council in the 20th century with Nostra Aetate, with the Second Vatican Council, and most stunningly with Pope St. John Paul II and Pope Benedict and so forth. So I hope that makes sense.
No, it does. And I have watched a few of Dr. Marshall's videos, especially he did one right after October 7th and essentially articulated supersessionism, even though he's very, I think, lofty and not overtly calling himself a supersessionist or identifying that as his theology. But I do believe that is kind of the strand of theology that he follows. And I think Candace Owens as well. And we can point to probably a lot of other of these woke right or, America First or anti-Zionist Catholics or Protestants, I think are kind of on that trend and making the claim that, if you do support Israel, and we're going to watch this part in the video in a second, then you're a dispensationalist. And dispensationalism, kind of like neocon, is this heuristic. It's like this word to evoke, where neocon in the lexicon that's emerged on the woke right kind of means, an established, Jew or a politician controlled by the Jews. A dispensationalist is kind of this almost dirty term, like you've been deceived theologically by a concerted effort by the Jews to pervert Christianity to support Zionism.
Yeah. And can I just make one quick comment? I'm curious why Patrick Bet-David cares that Taylor Marshall is a PhD in philosophy. It's not even in theology. And also, if we're talking about geopolitics, yes, there are theological underpinnings. There are always political implications to the gospel, certainly. But if you're going to talk about geopolitical things, wouldn't you get a geopolitical expert who's well-formed, let's say? But, I would not ask someone who is a foreign policy expert to teach a philosophy class. Why would I ask a philosopher to discuss very complicated geopolitics? It's just a question I have in these strange times we're living.
Yes. And I joked before we hit record, like, at least he's not a comedian, because apparently now comedians are like our new elites and our new like brilliant thinkers, especially on the woke right. But there is almost this and it's only with the Jews and Israel and Zionism. Like, this is the only topic where you have Christians making very authoritative declarations about geopolitics when they're not equipped to, or people in the political realm making deductions about theology and they're not even Christians. Like, it's this very weird realm in which like anything goes, and it's only when it pertains to the Jews.
Everyone's an expert. Yeah.
And everyone's an expert.
I'll quote St. Jerome again for you. And again, it's another paraphrase of Jerome, but he's, you know, this is a major paraphrase: butchers, bakers, candlestick makers, but the art of scripture is the one claimed by all, you know, like to your point about, you know, everyone's an expert now.
Yeah, everyone. Yeah. And I think the other, and I don't want to get too convoluted in the theology side of it, but he does talk about, and this is kind of where the fracture theologically, whether you're Catholic or Protestant, if you're a supersessionist or not, is on the idea of if you're grafted in or if the church replaced the Old Testament covenant that God had with the Jewish people. And he uses the term grafted, but what he's actually really saying is it's replaced. And so he's saying now that the church is the new chosen people, and then therefore people like Ted Cruz, who, you know, claim Israel, Christians who support Israel because there's a biblical mandate for it. Well, that is some sort of a theological deception that they've bought into, or that they're propagating to support the modern state of Israel. And we've talked too, the land promise is all over the Old Testament, and God is constant.
As a Catholic, we don't even need to, when we play more of the video, we can get into it, but we don't even need to go into, I don't need to convince anyone, especially Catholics, about land promises, about covenant. There's such a minimalist Catholic Zionism that can be proposed without even having to get into any of that.
Could you, like, and I know Nostra Aetate kind of touches on this, which is sometimes an unsatisfactory explanation for our Jewish friends, but that it's part of this just beautiful divine mystery, and that there's not an explicit explanation for how that covenant is transferred. Is like, that's always how I've understood with Nostra Aetate, like it's a divine mystery. We're not proposing dual covenant theology, but that we understand that the Lord does have a role.
That's the point that Taylor makes, is that if you, I mean, again, I know we're going to get more into the video, but in no way is rejecting supersessionism, which the church rejects, at all promoting dual covenant theology. There is one kingdom, and we are grafted into Israel.
And he makes it almost like this dichotomy, like either.
Yes. And I keep seeing this again and again and again with people who claim to be traditional Catholics, but it's not actually traditional to go against what the church is teaching, because we have a tradition called the development of doctrine. So it's kind of, it's not really traditional Catholicism, it's Catholic fundamentalism. No way is rejecting. The church is not dual covenant theology. The church is not saying Jews are saved one way and Christians are saved another. No, if anyone's saved, they're saved because of the church and because of Jesus. So that you can still reject supersessionism and make that claim, which the church in her magisterial teaching does.
Okay, so we'll just continue. And for reference, they're going to talk a lot about dispensationalism. And again, that's become like this boogie word, like, you know, a neocon to characterize Christians who support Israel as being somehow corrupted by a concerted Jewish effort to falsely or heretically support the modern state of Israel.
Those who are faithful to the new covenant of Jesus Christ, we belong to the bride of Christ, the mystical body of Christ, the church. And people will say, well, that's anti-Semitic, and but if Jesus is the Messiah and he is the King of the Jews, and he said he was, then that is the final and expressed will of God the Father for the world. And we need to help, you know, our Jewish, I think, family and friends to come in to know and love, serve Jesus Christ. I think that's the way to go. But so the idea that Ted Cruz puts forth, and a lot of these dispensationalists and a lot of people in MAGA, that like Israel, the Bible says we must give missiles to Israel, we must fund these wars.
What book is that in the Bible?
Well, they claim Genesis, but if you look it up,
I don't even think that this is correct. I think a lot of dispensationalists will actually point to Revelations and not Genesis. But even like that claim, right? Like he's saying like we have to provide missiles to Israel. Like I don't think I've ever heard like your average politician or MAGA supporter who's also a Zionist make this like theological claim straight to sending missiles to Israel. So I just, again, like the extreme language to color this as, you know, heretical or illogical, or like it's so crazy that it has to be the result of some sort of infiltration of the church theology. I don't know. I just thought that the language was very extreme.
I think Catholics who follow Taylor Marshall or who are tempted to follow him to make the, just as it's wrong to call people who criticize Israel or Israel's prudential judgments in policy anti-Semitic, you know, in which case Jews and Israelis would be anti-Semitic, and certainly they are not. He is doing the same thing when it comes to Catholics who support Jews in Israel, which most Catholics do. He's saying, oh, if you do, you know, if you support, you know, Iran, Israel defending itself against nuclear threat of Iran, well, then you're just a dispensationalist. I mean, it is the same kind of accusation, and very intimidating for Catholics who actually don't have these theological history and nuances down. Well, I don't want to be a heretic, and I don't want to be confused with, you know, Protestant theology. So Taylor Marshall must be right, but that is just again, it's not what the church teaches, and it's simply untrue. The church has no teaching about whether, you know, in this moment in the war, you know, Israel can make a strike on Iran's nuclear facilities, right? The church has theological just war principles that are helpful guides to prudential judgment, but good Catholics can make a case one way or the other. Mm-hmm. So again, he's blurring the lines of what theology is saying and what foreign policy or geopolitical experts, mm-hmm. you know, people who make those decisions, you know, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's and God's unto God's. And of course the lines are blurred, but again, I think he's intimidating Catholics to think if you can only be a good Catholic, you know, if you reject, you know, supporting Israel because the people who seem to support Israel have bad theology. Mm-hmm. Well, we can have theology that supports that. Just as it's just not the same theology. It's certainly not dispensationalism.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, like you're saying, like this fear mongering of like, you don't want to buy into Protestant teaching, because there's also in this like trad Catholic circle, and trying to be sensitive because I don't think everyone who's Catholic in this circle, like Catholic fundamentalists, I know trad is maybe
it's not traditional.
It's not, yes.
It's traditionalism. It's the ideology of tradition,
yes,
not actual
ideology of it.
Yeah.
I knew I was using that. I was like, no, that's not the right word. But there's also in some of these more extreme fundamentalist circles also an animosity towards Protestants. I've just been on the receiving end of a lot of like comments as well. Sure. So I think there's almost a fear mongering about the Jews, and then also about like, you don't want to be like a Protestant who's believing heretical teaching. And also the other thing is too, again, with this extreme, like I'm a Protestant, I support Israel biblically, but I'm not a dispensationalist. And so like making it seem like everyone who is a Protestant who supports Israel theologically or politically is then somehow a dispensationalist, which is also this dirty word, is false. Right. But he's going to get into the Scofield Bible, which I want to touch on because I think this has become something that the woke right has really propagated.
God says to Abraham, those who bless you, I will bless, and those who curse you, I'll curse. And in Galatians, St. Paul says, those who are in Jesus Christ are the children of Abraham and the heirs of the promises. So the Apostle Paul in the New Testament says, if you believe in Jesus, you are the child of Abraham and the heir of his promises. Mm-hmm. So that tells me that Christians, although we are grafted in, we are part of the people of God. We are, you could call, the new Israel. And so,
okay, but there's something different than being part of the people of God and then saying the new Israel. I also just wanted, that's like a huge extreme, because I would agree with the first premise that we are then the fulfillment of that biblical prophecy and the covenant God made with Abraham. But him saying like, now we're the new Israel is Dr. Taylor Marshall saying that. That's not at all found in the Bible.
One of the things that it's very frustrating for me as a Catholic and as, you know, I'm not a theologian. I've studied theological studies, but I have, you know, I'm very strict. I feel like the word theologian is just thrown around to anybody who's studied theology. You know, Pope Benedict's theologian, JP2, philosopher theologian. But what's frustrating to me in our technological, digital, social media world is that theology is a science. It takes intelligence. It's difficult. And the faith is mysterious.
Mhm.
The mystery of Israel is something that needs to be prophetically grappled with, studied. It's something that Pope Benedict has said we need more theological thinking and thought on this mystery of Israel. It is a mystery.
Mhm.
So when you have these people on social media that reduce Catholic theology to apologetics, or just, that you can just wrap it all up into a simple formula, you're really missing out on the fact that theology is the queen of the sciences. He makes no sense to me, Taylor, when he says, first of all, he skipped all those verses about, I'm glad he mentioned don't be arrogant. He's right about that. But, it's not, St. Paul says, not the you that support the root, but the root that supports you. Yeah.
Mhm.
And that the gifts and calling of God are irrevocable. The church teaches that the Jewish people are still God's chosen people. And so he's right to say that we're part of Israel. He's right to say that because we have been grafted in. But then he goes into talking about the new Israel, which the church uses that phrase, has used it I think in Lumen Gentium, which is a Second Vatican Council document, but they're not using it. It's not in the Bible, and it hasn't really been used since the Second Vatican Council, which is not to dismiss the veracity of it, but to say that our understanding of the new Israel or the new covenant in no way dismisses the old. I've not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it, Jesus says. So these are difficult and things to grasp.
Mhm.
To reduce it to kind of these like simple formulas, or to, just as I would say Ted Cruz makes the error of, if this is what he's doing, saying that every decision Israel makes is fine because the Bible says so. I think Taylor's making the other mistake, which is that, you can't just dismiss the Jewish people or Israel because, gosh, we're the new people of God.
Mhm.
In the same breath, he said, we're part of. Well, are we part of it?
Mhm.
Is Paul right that they support us, we don't support them, that we shouldn't be arrogant, that we've been grafted in, that we could be cut off just as easily? So which is it? Are we part of it? Because he's not wrong. There is only one kingdom, but it's we who've been grafted in. So I think, again, there is this great need by theologians and also by lay people to really pray with the mystery of Israel. What does it mean when the church is calling for us to have a preferential relationship with the Jewish people? That there are all our elder brothers and sisters, as John Paul II said, or that there are fathers in the faith, that we have a unique relationship with them that we have with no one else. These are very serious things that the church has directed us towards, that is getting so lost in all political conversation, of which very few of us are called to engage. We're called to support the Jewish people, and we have theological backing for that. What Israel does on a political scheme, right? We want to be formed by a Catholic worldview, and we want to call out, things that we maybe are critical of, but in no way are we supposed to he says, don't dismiss it, don't be dismissive in the beginning, but then that is exactly what he's doing.
There's a lot of like wordplay and contradiction in what he's saying.
Yeah.
100%.
So the idea, it's called dispensationalism. It's technically a Christian heresy. It's the idea that God has two peoples. He has plan A for Jews, plan A for Bs. There's Israel, there's the church, and God doesn't really mix those together. And it's more.
I think more specifically, it's this idea that God paused his covenant with the Jewish people, and then it's going to be fulfilled in the end times. And again, there's a lot in Revelation. So I don't think he's representing it in its totality either. Not that I am a dispensationalist, but when people have such strong opinions about something that they can't properly even summarize, it just raises red flags to me. But anyways.
More the role of the church to help financially and militarily support Israel. That's a new doctrine. It was invented by a guy named Darby in the 1800s. It was popularized.
Also, like the idea in the 1800s when dispensationalism was formed that we have to militarily support Israel, like the state of Israel wasn't even founded until 1948. So there's also like this false idea that it's almost like this political theology.
Like
a newer use of it. Right. But the doctrine itself doesn't mention anything about a modern state of Israel. because it wasn't even conceptualized or formed. This is around the time Zionism was also kind of taking form in Europe. But
yeah,
anyway.
and as a Catholic, none of this matters to me. I support Jews in Israel because of what the church teaches. And I follow the lead of Pope St. John Paul II, Pope Benedict, and all these wonderful saint popes we've had in the 20th century. Catholic Zionism, minimalist Catholic Zionism, has nothing to do with dispensationalism, has nothing to do with dual covenant theology, it has nothing to do with what he's about to talk about. So I just don't want Catholics listening to him, which many do, to feel confused, like it's one or the other. It's just not.
Yeah, 100%. Even if you're a Protestant, it's not one.
Yeah, I was going to say in your case. Yep.
In the early 1900s by the Scofield Bible. Scofield was not a good man. He left his wife. He was a drunk. He forged checks. He was a bad guy. He may have been funded by shady people. So this whole theology comes from kind of a dark place. And I think it's leading us as Americans, and with policy being banking on this theology, I think it's very dangerous. People need to check it out. They need to figure out where this comes from.
How do you do that? How do you do that? How do you get the two sides? Because it's not pretty,
No,
it's not pretty. This little division allows the devil to get in, and that's exactly where he likes it. He likes seeing a place like this, right? The division that's taking place, and it's not like it's a friendly debate. There's true animosity on the two opposing sides. How do you unify? How do you get both sides to work together, or just simply unify them? How do you do that?
You can't. I mean, we have to be honest. Sometimes when you're in business, there is not a unifying solution. The claims of Israel in 2025, there is no compromise position with their claim.
I think also Patrick Bet-David's talking about division between believers on the topic, and then now he's going to switch to Israel.
Solution, yeah.
To the political stuff, which we can finish with that. But the one thing I want to really highlight is this idea first that Darby was a bad guy. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But again, like kind of assassinating his character to then somehow say his theology is warped. And again, I'm not a dispensationalist, so I'm not being an apologist for it. But he adds in there, it was funded by shady people. And after this, I'm going to play a clip because this is something that Candace Owens has really popularized. And Ian Carroll, that like the Scofield Bible was actually funded by the Rothschilds, who are like that boogeyman, like the cabal, the Jewish elite, to then corrupt the church to support the modern state of Israel. Again, before the modern state of Israel even existed, before World War I even happened and the fall of the Ottoman Empire happened. So like the historic timeline is all over the place, but the underlying message and idea is that this is a corruption, a concerted effort by the Jews, the cabal, to infiltrate the church. And none of it is historically accurate. Again, it's happened before World War I. The Ottoman Empire was still very much intact. Israel as a nation was not even an idea yet. And so that's kind of what he's hinting at, but he's not saying it fully. But I think it's important to kind of zoom out and see how this idea is then amplified across this woke right movement, because it's extremely frustrating. And again, it's illogical and it's ahistorical. It's like creating a history out of different pieces that don't even line up on a historical timeline. Anyways, I find it very frustrating. But here you're going to see him switch to like the modern conflict. And again, I don't think that's what Patrick Bet-David's talking about.
To a division, and I don't know where that goes. But, we've been talking about this two-state problem for decades, and we'll probably be talking about it for decades to come, because I think the Israeli position is they're not going to budge. This is their belief. This is their constitution. This is what they want. So I don't know how you unify with that. What do you think? Is there a way?
I thought you were capable, man. I
brought
a guy here that's PhD and all this stuff, and we're going to find a way to solve this issue. That was that.
Anyways, yeah, and again, like it's not our job to reconcile with it. Like we're not at odds or at war with Israel. And he's like, I don't know how you reconcile that. It's like, okay, but it's not your conflict to reconcile either. Okay, really quickly, I just want to show you some of the ways these ideas that he kind of quietly inserted have become propagated or maybe more extremely talked about. So this one is Ian Carroll talking about the Scofield Bible, where he very much just spews a bunch of lies. It's like a minute long, but this is when Dr. Marshall's talking about like you should look at the shady way. the Bible was funded. This is essentially what he's trying to say.
Here's a rabbit hole for you. Here's a rabbit hole for all of us. In the early 1900s, right around when the Federal Reserve was founded and the Balfour Declaration happened, right at that exact same time.
Like he's talking about the difference of like over a decade between the Balfour Declaration and when the Federal Reserve was founded and when he's about to say the Scofield Bible was created, which was in 1909. So again, that timeline is all over the place and not actually connected.
Mm-hmm. The Rothschild family hired this dude, this pastor in the Deep South. He made a new version of the Bible called the Scofield Bible. He wrote this new Bible that has all these new interpretations of the text. So they didn't change.
Jewish influence.
Yes, literally.
It's also not Jewish influence. And it was just a Bible commentary. So it's not a different Bible. It's like a study Bible, like all of us probably have in our homes. So just because you don't agree with it theologically, great. I don't even think that Ian is a Christian too. So hearing a non-Christian talk about how the church was corrupt when he has zero idea about even basic theology is also just like so narcissistic.
That's where Judeo-Christianity kind of came from. And
Judeo-Christianity comes from even what Dr. Marshall acknowledged, which was the early church and the fact that even the first Christians were considered, you know, to be part of this new sect of Judaism. And there's a shared inherent both moral system, belief from the Old Testament that we were grafted into. And at least Dr. Marshall acknowledged that. But the idea that Judeo-Christian values was then created in 1909 is so just unequivocally false.
Idea that Israel is this modern Israel thing is the Israel of the Bible. It came from that Bible, and the Scofield Bible was funded by the Rothschild family, and then it was pushed because they owned the publisher that publishes like all the books. I think it was Oxford Press, and so they had the deals that they could make to get that Bible into all the mega churches across whole denominations of Christianity. And so that was when Christianity got kind of Jewified.
So that's the claim. That the church has been infiltrated by the Rothschilds. Again, I don't think there's any evidence of this. I've seen quite a few Christians go through and basically say the Rothschilds had nothing to do with the University Press of Oxford. The press existed long before the Rothschild bank dynasty was created. The state of Israel wasn't even an idea back in 1909. So there's no evidence for this, but this is kind of what is becoming widespread on the woke right from a theological perspective. And people like Dr. Marshall say things very beautifully or very subtly, but that's really what he's saying. And I think when you listen to Ian Carroll say it, it sounds crazy, but you have people who don't fact check anything and they think that, yeah, this is true. So yeah, that's something that has infuriated me for a long time, but it's important to connect the dots on this like woke right agenda because it all kind of moves within the same sphere, but there's different motivations. There's theological, there's political, but the through line is just anti-Semitism and trying to demonize the Jews, whether it be for infiltrating the church, for killing Palestinians, for being unmoving in a two-state solution, like whatever position you take, it's just this idea that the Jews are corrupt, or Candace Owens says the synagogue of Satan.
Yeah, I just want to say 3 quick things that might be helpful, especially to Catholics who might be listening. It is unfair to, again, just throw out anti-Semitism accusations. However, if Catholics need to be aware that it wasn't anti-Semitism per se that led to, it wasn't, let me put it this way. Anytime you have people who are creating anti-Jewish, anti-Judaic sentiment, feeling, spirit, that does lead to anti-Semitism. And it is no secret that the anti-Judaic theologies, again, never dogma, but anti-Judaic theologies and writings of the church fathers did lead to pagan anti-Semitism of the 20th century that led to the Holocaust. The church recognizes that, is honest about that, is repentant about that, and admitted that. But Catholics still need to know that. So anytime you're fueling, you could say, well, it's not anti-Semitic. Okay, fair. But is it anti-Judaic? Is it creating not the spirit of God, but a spirit of hostility and demonizing a whole group of people? Is it anti-Semitic adjacent is another. So that's one thing to think about. Like we've made this mistake before, and it has had very serious consequences. And Hitler named it. He said, you know, I'm only doing what you in the church have been, you know, I'm just finishing what you guys started. And he wasn't wrong about that.
Mhm.
So that's one point I wanted to make. The other point is that is the modern state of Israel the biblical Israel? I really love being Catholic for this reason. The modern state of Israel shares the same land, and it shares the same people who've lived there continuously since the days of Joshua.
Mhm.
Even in the Bible, the borders of Israel have different diversity and contours. So you cannot make an identical claim that way.
Mhm.
But you can recognize that if the church is asking you to be in a unique and preferential relationship with Jews and Judaism on their terms, Pope John Paul II said, then supporting Israel is supporting the Jewish people because that's where most of them live. And so, you know, it's like you can't always identify the person with the house they're living in, but if stuff that you're promoting is going to be burning down their house,
Mhm.
like think about it that way. Again, it's hard to think about these things that way because we really like to think very much in black and white. And I can't remember the third thing I wanted to share, but you know who gets the Judeo-Christian piece is Islamists, right?
Mhm.
They get it. Today the Jews, tomorrow you. They see American Israel as the same piece. They see Christians and Jews of the same piece. They have better Christian theology, Catholic theology than some, some believers. They get it. We should get that too.
Yeah, that's a great point. And like just in closing, it's so frustrating to me is this like moral outrage towards the Jews, but a complete blind eye to Islamism in the region and how it's essentially ethnically cleansed some of the first Christians. So someone like Dr. Marshall or Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens, who claim to represent the Christians, should really focus their moral outrage there, but they don't because they share a common quote unquote enemy or adversary or disdain for Zionism. And so they're useful allies now. But again, like you said, they have a very similar vision for the Christians that they have for the Jews. In fact, it's identical. It's just first the Jews and then the Christians.
Yeah.
So yeah. Well,
Middle East Christians know this.
yes, I know. And your family's a great legacy. I love your understanding of it
Thank
so
you.
much. But thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Dominique.
It's my favorite.